Time is fast approaching to do the V8 conversion on the 66 Falcon. I'm going to be doing that this winter once the weather turns cold and ugly, and we're going to be pulling out the mighty 206, the Tower of Power here, and we're going to replace it with the 302 that I purchased a while back. So this conversion is easy, but there's some things that you have to think about ahead of time if you're going to do one of these swaps. So I want to go over that today and just give anybody that's going to do this a heads up. Now, if you're going to be putting a completely different engine like a Cleveland or an FE or a 460 or anything like that, all of this goes out the window because you're going to have to do some completely different things. But as far as a bolt-in conversion like the factory intended, 6-cylinder versus V8, this is what you're going to have to address. This is not going to be all-inclusive because I'm sure I'm going to find more things as I go on with this job, but this is the stuff that I know right up front that needs to be taken care of. And two items that you're going to need right off the bat are the V8 frame mounts for the motor mounts. They are different than the 6-cylinder. And the throttle linkage that goes on the firewall. You can see this has a very short angle in this area here, whereas the 6-cylinder, because it has to reach the carburetor on the entire other side, is a very long piece that runs all the way across the firewall. So you're going to have to get those. Now, another thing that may come into play, and I'm not sure yet on this car, is the radiator hoses. The water pump and all of that, depending on what year you're using, the water pump outlet could be on the left or the right side. If you're using a roller block, that's going to be on the opposite, unless you change the front timing stuff, and I don't want to get into all that differences. You got to know what you're using, what engine you have. This is a 68 or 9 302, so it is identical to what would have been in the factory. But you might have to buy different radiator hoses. They may be different. The radiator itself is going to have to be at least thicker, if not completely different. This car has an aluminum radiator in it, and I got another one with this engine, but I think they're identical. So as long as the inlets and outlets are in the right places, we should be good to go, because it is the thicker version. Exhaust is going to be something that you have to consider, and I ran into a problem with this on mine. This engine came with some really nice, although somewhat rusty hooker headers that I had fully planned on using. However, I'm not going to, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. What I'm going to wind up doing is using the factory high-performance cast manifolds, which are available as reproductions. And they take a little bit of port matching so that they actually work right, but aside from that, they're durable, so I won't have problems with leaks or anything like that. The only thing I got to check on and make sure is that the angled plugs on these Roush heads will work with them. I'm not sure on that yet. It's something I still have to look into. Hopefully they will. Because the reason we can't use the headers is because I am keeping the column shift. Now, a lot of you probably would not be doing that, but apparently the headers, believe it or not, look at all this space we have with the 6, but the headers, all of them foul on the shifting, on the shift linkage. So if you have a column shifter sticker automatic, you can see this protrusion out here, it's going to foul on the headers. I have been told or read that you can modify this a little bit and shorten it to make it clear the headers, or, you know, booger the headers up to make it fit, but I'm not interested in doing any of that. And this car is not going to be a drag special. It's just going to drive down the road. So I'm going to go with the manifolds. I'm probably going to lose a couple of horsepower. Oh well, I don't think I'll even notice it. Now, my engine came with a C4 attached to it, and I'm going to wind up using this because it's probably got a shift kit in it, and it has a new torque converter. So I'm just going to use this one. Even though I had just rebuilt the one that's in the car, I just rebuilt it to stock specs, and it's a lazy shifter, and it's a green dot, so the shifting sequence is out of whack too. So there's a lot of advantages to going to this later model C4. If you want to use your original transmission, if you have a C4, all you have to do, if you have one of these with the removable bell housing, is just swap that around to the V8 when it should be no problem. You probably are going to want to change the torque converter to something more suitable. But the transmission otherwise will fit in and work just fine. And sorry for the bad lighting, but the other thing that's going to be important on any of these Falcons is you're going to need to change the rear axle. The dopey little axle that's in the 6-cylinder cars is not going to tolerate the V8 power unless you're bone stock and are very gentle with driving it. Otherwise, you can pretty much figure that the ring gear is going to shed some teeth. So this is an 8-inch. This is out of a V8 Falcon I got. And this is a bolt-in. There are other options, of course. You can do an 8.8 or you can get an 8-inch out of a Mustang or something. But you have to be very careful about the width of these because the Falcon and the Fairlane are the only two that share the correct axle width. Otherwise, you're going to have to be narrowing or otherwise futzing around with making it work. And again, I wasn't interested in going through all that. I think the 8-inch is perfectly fine for what I'm going to be doing. I don't need a 9-inch. I don't need an 8.8. I'm sure that this 8-inch is going to be more than happy to handle the power I'm going to send to it. Because it was back in the day. I mean, these things were what was used in, Shelby Mustangs and stuff. So there's that. Now, because we want to do that, this only comes as a 5-lug. And the car is going to be a 4-lug. So you're going to have to change the 5-lug wheels. And of course you're going to want to do that front and rear. Now changing it to the front to 5-lug isn't that big of a deal. But you have to also budget for new wheels and tires to go with the 5-lug pattern. Also, when we're doing all of this, keep in mind, if you're getting stuff like I did, like this used axle, all of this is going to have to be going through. It's going to require all new brakes, both sides. It's going to require new U-bolts most likely. I'm going to have to take the cover off and pull the gears out, so I'm going to need a gasket or some good make a gasket for that. Change the oil. Change the wheel bearings and seals, and so on. And the same again with the front. So this results in a pretty big laundry list of things that I need to get. And my list may be longer than yours because of other things that I want to add or replace while I'm doing all this, such as the leaf springs. The rear leaf springs on this thing are really crusty and ugly, and I think it's just better to replace them than try to redo them. So I have rear brakes, differential gasket, axle seals, leaf springs, new brake drums because the ones on that used axle are junk, new wheels and tires, exhaust head pipe. Obviously if you're doing headers you're not going to need that. I'm probably just going to have somebody make something. Have to look at things like the carburetor base gasket because we pulled the carburetor off. Tacking gauges, that's just extras for me. The flex plate, the one on the engine, has some teeth that look kind of ugly, so I'm going to have to get a new one of those. Need a carb kit for the Edelbrock that came with the engine. An air cleaner. It came with one, but I don't necessarily like it, so I'm going to have to think about replacing that. Spark plugs, those are all fouled in that donor engine. Radiator hoses, various gaskets, the exhaust manifolds because we can't use the headers. And then while I'm in there, might as well do the rear shocks. And oh yeah, because we're going to 5-lug, it's a good time to do the the disc brake conversion. So I have to get a master cylinder, proportioning valve, and so on. And then I want to get a new steering wheel for the car because this one's not in very good shape. So there's a whole laundry list that goes along with this, and all kinds of other nuts and bolts and incidentals and that kind of thing. So even if you're doing a simple 289, 302, 351 Windsor conversion on one of these cars, there's still a lot of things that you have to get and plan for that's going to drive the expense up. So In the next month or two, I'm going to go ahead and start collecting all these parts that I need to do all this stuff and get that all together, so hopefully we can just smoothly transition. But this is going to be more than just sticking an engine in the car. It's going to be an engine, transmission, brakes, rear axle, wheels and tires. I mean, it all has to happen together. So it's going to be a not a weekend project for sure. But I will cover it all as we move forward with it, and I invite you to follow along. Subscribe if you haven't to keep up to date on all this. And I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching.